Hello and welcome to Geforce GTX 760 overclocking tutorial by Alex Morose. In this video tutorial you will learn the basic information how to overclock your GTX 760 with softwares, and there is no hardware is involved, so it's going to be pretty safe, but keep in mind that you're doing it on your own risk and expenses. Let's go ahead and go over the requirements and what kind of software we need for this project. You need any brand of Geforce GTX 760, could be 2GB or 4GB. In this video tutorial I used EVGA Geforce GTX 760 2GB Superclock edition with the backplate. You will also need the power supply, 550 watt at minimum I would say, otherwise your overclock could be unstable or unsafe. You can have 600 is excellent, 700 is excellent, 1000 is excellent as well, but at least 550 watt power supply. Make sure it's at least bronze grade on it. You need EVGA Precision X software, that is freeware and comes with the driver disk with Geforce GTX 760 if it's EVGA version. If not, you can go ahead and Google for it. You need the MSI Afterburner software, which is also freeware. Just Google for it. You need the GPU-Z software, which is freeware as well. Just Google for it to get our statistics when we are going to overclock, to see the values and how the values are changing and increasing. You need, of course, few games, and I suggest you also to have 3D Mark or Unigine Heaven benchmark to test the stability. Let's learn the basic components information on the video card before we'll tweak settings for those components. So let's go ahead and learn, what is GPU, what is memory, before we'll apply some settings to it. As you can see over here, I have the opened video card, which is Geforce GTX 760 from EVGA. I just removed the cooler, and you have the PCB and the cooler, which is heatsink right there on top. This is actually FTW version, and I do have FTW version. Actually no, this is the superclocked. I have two different versions, folks, keep in mind. I have FTW version and superclock version, and I will go ahead and review them both, and it's going to be different tutorials, and then I will go ahead and benchmark them and put against each other and let you know if it's worth to get FTW versus the superclock edition. As you can see, this is our PCB, and the GPU will be right there in the middle. This is the graphic processor unit, which is GPU, and on our overclocking software that we're going to use for this project, it will be called GPU clock, or on some other softwares will be called core clock. So keep that in mind, and we're going to apply some values on a GPU clock or core clock. So whatever I will say, GPU clock or core clock, this is what we're going to apply for. There's little chips around those this GPU. Some are missing because they designed for 4GB version, and this is the 2GB version. And this called video memory, which is GDDR5 chips for our GTX 760, and it's called memory clock, and we will be applying some values to those chips. Alright, enough of theories, and let's see some action and learn how to overclock GTX 760, right? Well, you asked for it. Alright folks, let's go ahead and learn how to overclock our GTX 760 Superclock edition from EVGA that comes with the free backplane on the back of the video card. Keep in mind that you can apply the same methods to overclock GTX 760 from EVGA Superclock edition without the backplane as well. Also, you can apply these methods to overclock any GTX 760's video cards by any other brands, so keep this in mind. But in this video tutorial, as again, I'm using the GTX 760 Superclock with backplane from EVGA. Okay, I assume that you went and you downloaded the MSI Afterburner tool, which is a very handy tool to have, and GPU-Z tool, which is as well as very handy tool to have. Both of those tools are freeware, And also EVGA Precision X. You install the EVGA Precision X that comes with that pretty much came with your drivers on a CD. If not, just go and visit EVGA website and download the Precision X. Keep in mind, if you're watching this video in 2014, the Precision X tool will probably change. The whole design, user interface may be changed, but just keep in mind that if you will go ahead and use the same methods, it will work with the other user interface. You just need to understand what kind of values we're looking to increase and decrease to be able to overclock our video card. So let's go ahead and run the EVGA Precision X tool. Keep in mind, if you're going to use the tool that came with your CD, DVD disc, driver disc, it will look just like this. As again, if you will download it from EVGA website, the whole user interface may be different, but as again, just learn and understand exactly the values by watching this video that you need to increase to be able to overclock your video card successfully. Okay, the first thing what you want to do when you're overclocking your GTX 760 video card, you want to increase the power target. Why we are increasing the power target? You need to increase the power target to be able to basically allow video card for the higher temperature, to run at the higher temperature without decreasing its clocks. Because on GTX 760, 770 and 780 video cards, in the BIOS there is a function that will decrease the frequency of the GPU and or core clock, and decrease the frequency of the memory clock when the temperature will hit a certain degree. In our case, we increase it to 95 Celsius, so before it will hit 95 Celsius, CPU will perform at the frequencies that we're going to set, and the memory clock will perform at the frequency that we'll set. And after 95 Celsius, BIOS will go ahead and decrease those frequencies to make sure that video cards to cool down. So keep that in mind, that's very important. And also power target 115% means that we will increase the power delivery to a video card by 115%, which is as well necessary. So the next thing what you want to do, you want to first apply the GPU clock or a core clock on some other overclocking tools. Keep in mind that you can overclock your video card not only with the EVGA Precision X tool, which is right here, but you can also use the MSI Afterburner tool, and there is some other tools out there that you may use. Okay, so but when you're using any tool to overclock your GTX 760, 770 or 780 video card, you're looking to increase the GPU clock first, test and find out the maximum stability on the GPU clock, and after this, here's the GPU clock right here. As you can see, I'm increasing. It says GPU clock offset, and after this, you pretty much want to go ahead and play with the memory clock and find out the maximum stable frequency on our memory clock. Let's go ahead and increase the GPU clock by 50 plus 50 megahertz and click apply. After this point, we just increased our GPU clock by 50 megahertz, and now video card under the full load in your favorite games will perform and run at the 50 frequencies and 50 megahertz higher than it usual from the stock, from the default. And let's go ahead and run the GPU-Z tool, and we will go ahead and we'll learn about the GPU-Z tool. Let me go ahead and default. Here's the default button right here. Always click default button if something doesn't work out, and start fresh. When you click in default button, all the frequencies that you applied will go to default manufacturer stock values on GPU and memory and everything else. This is your saver button right here, default button. If something will go and your video card is freezing, if you apply the frequency on the GPU too high or on the memory too high and you can see some dots on the screen, click the default button and it will just clear the frequencies. And if it's not going to help, just go ahead and restart your computer, and after that point all the frequencies will be cleared. Keep that in mind, that software overclocking is much safer overclocking than hardware overclocking, because after your computer losing the power and you just do the fresh restart of your computer, all the overclocking values are gone, unless you save it under the profile, which is I'm not recommend for you to do when you a beginner overclocking. Make sure first you find your stable 100% stable values on the GPU clock and on the memory clock, and then you can save under the profiles. Okay, so right here, as you can see, our GPU, the GPU-Z program basically giving you some values, handy values to have, your video card name, you can save your BIOS for future use if you want to share with somebody, give you some other information, how many unified shaders, also pixel fill rate right here, gigapixels, 34 gigapixels. This value will be increased when we will overclock our video card. That's how video card will perform better. And also the bandwidth will increase as well when we will overclock our memory. Right now it's 192.3 gigabit a second. Also there is a GPU clock value will increase right here when we will increase it, as well as memory clock will increase when we will increase our memory clock, and of course boost, which is a GPU clock but under the boost function, will increase as well. And those default clock values will always stay the same, so you can keep in mind what was by the manufacturer, just in case if you got lost. As SLI option, if you have multiple video cards and have one video card, keep in mind when you have multiple video cards, overclocking may be slightly lower, because it's going to heat up more, because the distance between two video cards is short and the air circulation is not that perfect as when you're running just single video card. Some other information right here, and when you will have SLI mode, it will say enable, and when you're going to click over here, it will put you two video cards, and you can slide between two video cards and see the values. Okay, let's go ahead and start overclocking. Let's go ahead and apply by 50 megahertz. When you're overclocking your GTX 760, 50 megahertz plus 50 megahertz offset on GPU clock or core clock will be just fine. Let's go ahead and click apply, and it will just go ahead and take it. And now you can see our GPU clock right now is 1122. Before it was 1072 megahertz. Now it's increased by 50 megahertz, and our boost clock as well is increased, because boost clock is responsible for the GPU clock, but it's under the boost function. It's 1187 versus the stock value 1137. Okay, after you increased any clock on the GPU, you want to make sure and test it. And to be able to test it, I suggest you to download MSI Afterburner, and I assume that you download it and install it as well. Let's go ahead and run it. And MSI Afterburner has a handy tool right here under the K icon right here. Keep in mind, if MSI Afterburner user interface will be changed, pretty much you're looking for the combustor right here. Combustor, the tool that comes with the MSI Afterburner, it's an excellent tool that's going to test your GPU. But keep in mind, do not limit yourself just to combustor. Test your video card with the at least 2 different games after the combustor, just to make sure that frequencies are stable and you're not freezing. When you're going to freeze up during the playing your games, it means that GPU clock is a little bit too high, and the video card doesn't receive enough voltage to be able to operate at the GPU clock under the full load. So you want to back up maybe by 10 or 15 megahertz if your video card will freeze up in a game. So keep that in mind. So let's say if 50 megahertz and when you apply and you're playing the game and it will freeze up, and when you used to play it on the stock values it didn't freeze up, then you want to go ahead and maybe lower it by 10 megahertz and plus 40 values and click apply and test it again. Okay, and let's go ahead and with 50 megahertz. I know 50 megahertz will be just fine with any GTX 760, so if you're starting overclocking, start with 50 megahertz volume. And let's go ahead and test it by clicking MSI Afterburner and K tool right here. It will run the combustor and it will pretty much test it. Run this application for about 30 minutes, and see how it will do. Right here you have some values, GPU load, you have the GPU temperature, keep that in mind. As well as you can see on the right, you have the GPU TPD under the power using 94% right now, and we set to use it 115%. So when it will hit 150 above the 115%, then it might be freeze up and crash. Your drivers might be crashed. That's why you want to increase that. Let me show it to you. Under the precision, this level right here, when you're overclocking, you want to increase it to 115 instead of 100. Click apply, and now we will give the video card more more power. It will receive more power, and now it can use 111.19% on the TPD, and basically generates more heat but receiving more power as well. Okay, and that more power is required when we're increasing the voltage. So basically it can when frequencies are increased, voltage needs to be increased as well, so it's going to deliver more data and over that voltage, over that frequency with more voltage. Okay, just play it about 30 minutes and will be fine. After this, play 1 or 2 games that you have and test it with the games as well. And if nothing is freezing up, you can go ahead and apply some more values over here. And right here, as you can see, I have the also some settings that's showing for me, like GPU 91 Celsius, and that's pretty high, 91 Celsius. So what you want to do, you want to apply the fan speed and make it higher. And right now 91 Celsius, that's pretty high right here. But this, keep in mind, in combustion, you're using the 100% load on your CPU, and it will heat up your CPU as best as it can. I believe it based on a firmware. It was before the firmware was one of the softwares that heat up your GPU like under the heavy loads, and it generates so much heat. Your games is probably not going to generate that much heat, but keep that in mind. So 92, 91 Celsius on the GPU right now, and we set to go up to 95 Celsius at least, so we are fine right here. Also, when you overclocking, there is a fan speed right here and a precision. You can click auto and uncheck the auto, and you can pretty much apply the values if you want, and or keep it on auto and it will automatically apply it. If it's going to be too loud for you, uncheck the auto and apply the values that you want by right here, by using this scroller right here, and you can pretty much just apply as much as you want. As you can see, I'm applying right now 87, 92. Make sure its auto is unchecked, and when auto is checked, it will go automatically. At 94% on the fan speed, the video card is not so noisy, as you can hear. Usually when EVGA was using the single fan video cards, it was extremely noisy, and at 94 it was like a vacuum somewhere just behind you, like 5 meters away from you. But those dual fans are doing a great job, and cooling on those 7060 Superclock GTXs and 7060 FTW GTXs are excellent, as well as on GTXs 770s. Those dual ACX design cooling solution is excellent. Okay, so we got an idea right now, and it's stable. We just test it. We can close it after 30 minutes. After that point, to be able to see some more values on the screen during your games, let's say when you're playing the games and you want to see what the temperature is and etc., you want to click on settings in the afterburner, MSI afterburner, and go under the on-screen display, actually monitoring right here. Under the monitoring, you want to see what you want to see on the screen. Let's say frame rate. Click under the frame rate and click on show in on-screen display, and pretty much it will show it on screen display when you're playing your games, if it will be checked like this. Okay, and that's pretty much it, folks, and that's how you're setting it, and you can see it when you're running your favorite games during the test. You can check what you want to see in OCD, so on screen display, and if you don't need the let's say GPU usage on screen or frame speed on screen display, you can click on show on screen display, disable this mark, and it will take care of it. Here we go, and now it was stable. Let's go ahead and bring some more, as I know that this video card is stable under the 100 for me, but keep in mind your video card may be not stable at 100. It depends to the video card and GPU itself. Even if you have the same video card, it's not necessary that it will be stable at the same frequency as I'm running right now, and it's stable for me. It depends to your cooling in your case, and as well to GPU revision batch. Some GPU may take more power and basically more heat and be stable. Some GPU can take less voltage and be stable at less voltage, and some requires to take more voltage to be stable at the same frequency. So it's up to the silicon on a GPU, exact the revision batch version. So I know 100 megahertz is stable for my video card. At 90 megahertz it's crashing, and I think it's a wall. The GPU is hitting wall for my particular GPU. 80 megahertz plus 80 megahertz is stable as well, additional 80 megahertz. And so I suggest you to go ahead after 50. How to find out what is your stable frequencies for your GPU? Apply by 10 megahertz and test it. Let's go ahead and go with 60. Apply 60 in the MSI Afterburner. Click on combustion and test it for 20 minutes. Heat up your GPU, keep eye on your temperature. If you need to increase the fan speed, go ahead and do that to cool it down, and pretty much run it for 20 minutes stable. Run 2 or 1 more game, one of your favorite games, and as well as suggest you to run maybe Unigine Heaven 3.0 or 2.5 or 4.0, or as well as 3D Mark, and see control the score. What is the benchmark score will be? If your benchmark score will decrease from the previous score, that means that overclocking is not stable and pretty much will crash at some point. If your 3D Mark or Unigine Heaven score is increased by just a little bit, means that you're going to the right direction. Keep in mind that it's necessary for you maybe install one of the benchmarks like 3D Mark or Unigine Heaven, which is free benchmarks, and test it after each overclocking to make sure your score is increasing just by a little bit. And when it's increasing, means that you're moving to the right direction. When your score will decrease by 2 FPS, means that GPU is unstable. This is the first sign before it will crash on you in any benchmarks or any games. So here we go, 60 megahertz. You test it, it's right and it's stable. Then you want to go ahead and apply the 70 megahertz, and pretty much click 70, click apply button, and after this point click combustion, test it in combustion. After this point test it in 3D Mark or Unigine Heaven, and test it is one of your favorite games as well. Make sure everything is stable, nothing is freezing up, and if nothing is freezing up, you can continue applying some values. If it will freeze up, as again, you want to go ahead and back up by from 70 back up to 60 by 10 megahertz value. As you see, I click on this circle and I'm using my left and right keyboard keys on my keyboard and applying the values. So it will freeze up 60, then it will be your maximum stable. If not, keep going, and maybe after 70 was okay, do 80, click apply and test it, and if it will be fine, then it's fine. Then you want to move on after that point and apply some more. I know the 80 is fine, but when I click in 90 it will crash, and when I will click 100 it won't crash. So in my case 90 is like a GPU wall, and sometimes some GPU will have that wall, and you can just increase maybe by 20 megahertz and see if it will crash or not. Sometimes it will not crash after that point, but if it will crash after if you will do 90, and then if you will do 100, then you know that those frequencies are not stable. Pretty much GPU is not receiving enough voltage to run at those frequencies, or the temperature is too high for the GPU to run, and pretty much it just throttling and lowering the GPU frequencies, or automatically cutting the voltage to the GPU, and GPU freezing and losing the connection between the operating system drivers, and basically freeze up, and you have the black screen. So I know 100 is good for me, and for some people maybe 125 or even 130 will be fine. You know, it's up to you guys, but test it by 10 steps, by 10 megahertz steps increasing, and find your values. When you will find your values on the GPU, after this point you want to go ahead and find your values on the memory. And how to find the values on the memory? So first, you're starting, as I told you already, overclocking the GPU right here. After you overclock your GPU, sometimes it can call GPU clock or core clock, you want to go ahead and overclock your memory when you find your maximum stable values. And memory, I suggest you to go ahead on this GTX 760 start, or any 760 GTXs, start with 150 and click apply, and go ahead and under the combustion test it. And when you test it under the combustion and then 3D Mark or Unigine Heaven benchmarks, or in your favorite games as well, if you don't see any dots on screen, any strikes on the screen, just some lines, then you're fine. Because when memory is unstable, pretty much the first sign, it will show you some sign on the screen or some dots, and this is the sign that memory is not receiving enough voltage and cannot operate at that frequency. At some point it will freeze up, so you want to back up. And on the memory, I suggest you to back up at least by 15 megahertz steps. Okay, it's stable, and then you want to increase. So I would say try 150, and after that point try 200, and try 200, then test it as again combustion, one of your favorite game, and some of the benchmarks. Okay, if it's working for you, don't see any dots and strikes, lines on the screen, then go ahead and try 300. On my version of video card, I'm very impressed. It can go so high on overclocking. Try 300. If it will be stable at 300, then try 400. Okay, try 400. Because this EVGA video card comes with the low frequency on the memory, which is 1500, and under this is the GPU Z as again, under the 1500 by the stock values right here, it's the default clock values, which is by stock by manufacturer, 1500 megahertz. This is the memory. So to be able to receive the total frequency on the memory, you need to multiply it by 4, and pretty much it's going to be 6000 megahertz. And for this GDDR5, 600 megahertz is nothing, and I'm pretty sure that they're using the same GDDR5, maybe just a little bit cheaper GDDR5, but pretty much the same as they're using on GTX 770. And those video cards can go up to easy up to 7000 megahertz. So 1500 times 4 is 6000. Right here I have 1600 megahertz times 4 now, and we're around, I would say 6280 megahertz, around that point right now, right? It's still pretty low, and you can go higher, but after 400 megahertz you test it with combustion and make sure it's doesn't show any dots on the screen and any lines, and screen just looks just as the way it should be. After that point you can go ahead and do 500. Do the 500, click apply, and it's going to increase value 1752 megahertz. It's 252 over the regular times 4. That's incredible. 500 megahertz up. Okay, so after this point, pretty much if it's keep in mind that it doesn't say over here that it's increased by 500 megahertz, because we need to divide 500 megahertz divided by 2. Okay, by 2 in our case, and to receive this value, and to have the total frequency, some frequency for our memory, we need to GPU Z frequency multiply by 4 as again, and 1752 by 4, we will receive the outstanding frequency on our memory, the frequency that it can operate. Okay, and why they're doing this? Because this is the GDDR5 rules, and GPU-Z is using GDDR5 rules, so pretty much you need to multiply this frequency by 4. And right here, so here we go, 500. After this point, if it's stable in the combustion and in your favorite games and benchmarks, you don't see any strikes and lines, what you want to do, you pretty much want to increase by 20 steps. When you're overclocking your memory, I suggest you go by 20 steps and test it. If it's stable, as again 540, 540, test it. If it's stable, then again go higher, go 560, and go 560, apply, test it with combustion, any benchmarks, and see your favorite games. If you see any strikes and lines and dots on the screen, if not, then just go higher. I know that this memory on my particular video card is stable up to 600 because I went by 20% steps. Click apply, test it, and I test it everywhere. It's stable at these frequencies. I'm impressed by this, and pretty much it's 1800 right here, so it's going to be around 7200 megahertz on the GDDR5 memory, which will be 1200 megahertz higher than the original stock manufacturer values, which will increase the bandwidth dramatically. 230 .7 gigabit a second. That's a lot versus the stock 230.7. Let's go ahead and click default, and we will see what our default will be. 192.3 gigabit a second, so 230 on the memory. That's impressive. We increased by 40 gigabit a second on our memory. Very impressive. And let me just go ahead and slide it to 600, and I know the 600 is stable. After 600, like 615, I'm receiving this streaks on the screen. And when I tested the Call of company of here too, and 3D Mark and Unigine, so I decided to go with 600 because there is no streaks and it was stable. Here we go, and 100 on my GPU because it wasn't freezing when I was playing the games. Here we go, so you can see 230 gigabit a second on our bandwidth. Also our pixel fill rate is increased to 37.5 right here. And at the stock values, let me go ahead and show you how to use the profiles. You're clicking the right button on the profile. Now if you test it and everything is working, and click lock, and now it's locking right here. Let's go ahead and click default values. Keep in mind on pixel fill rate 37.5 gigapixel a second, 34.3 gigapixel a second, so 3 gigapixels a second higher, which pretty much left button right here under the profiles. Now click apply, and you got your values. As again, how to save the values when you apply it and everything is working. Right button under the number of the profiles, it will save it, and left button to load it. So right button of your mouse to save it, left button to load it. Make sure you apply button every time. So here's our frequencies under the GPU-Z. Incredible, right folks? By the way, for those who's interested, the image on the background was taken by me. It's Denver, Colorado. I took it, and it's my photography. It's a beautiful image. Here we go. You just learned how to overclock your video card pretty much. And let's say if 600 is not, you see some dots and streaks and lines on the screen, just back up by 20 megahertz. Make it 580. Click apply and test it. If it will be stable, then maybe 580 is your stable frequencies on your memory. For some folks, maybe even will go like 620 or 630, even higher than that values, or 625. As again, apply and test it, find your best frequencies. But you on the memory, as again, follow my rule. I suggest you to follow my rule, applying by 20 megahertz on the memory, increase or decrease. If it's unstable, decrease by 20 megahertz. If it's stable, increase by 20 megahertz till you find out that unstable point. And don't worry if it will crash. Even if your system will reboot, it will do nothing to your system. Software overclocking is pretty much safe. I'm overclocking since the year of 2000 and never heard or have any problems with the software overclocking. Okay, and as again, those values we want to increase as well. Power target, that's the first values when you overclocking, and then right button click under the profile, make sure it's saved with those values as well. So that's pretty much it, folks. And as again, if GPU clock will be unsafe at this point, 10 megahertz decrease and test it. If it's still unstable, 10 megahertz decrease and test it. If it's stable at 100 megahertz, you can maybe try 110 megahertz by 10 megahertz increase. Apply, test it, and if it will be stable at that point, maybe go higher. Okay, but keep in mind you want to play game at least 30 minutes, and the benchmarks at least 30 minutes, as well as combustion. There is also voltage and tweaks right here under the Precision X, and I don't believe in these values, because when I even increase by 12 microvolts and clicking apply, it just doesn't help me even with 5 megahertz on a GPU. Pretty much this is the GPU voltage. It allows you to increase some GPU voltage on a GPU, and in theory it should allows you to increase the frequency even higher. But as I'm using and overclocking the Geforce since GTX 660 and GTX 560 and 500 series, 600 series, and 700 series, when they invented this new way of overclocking Geforces. Before it wasn't like this. Well, it didn't help me any bit on the stability, so I don't believe in this. And I suggest you, I think maybe they just make it just for you to believe that you're increasing something, or if it even increasing some voltage, let's assume that it doesn't work, it's just not enough. I believe you need to increase a little bit more to keep it stable GPU at that point. It's not enough. 12 microvolts is not enough. I would say 20 or 40 microvolts if you can increase, then it will be fine, and you can push your GPU a little bit higher. But as again, those kind of increasing required some hardware modification on your transistors on the back of your video card, which is I'm not suggesting you to do so if you're a beginner, because it's not the safest way of overclocking, which versus the software overclocking, which is completely safest way. Alright folks, that's pretty much it. So just keep it at stock over here, and this is my stock values. Pretty neat. 3 FPS boost, 3 FPS when you're having 30 FPS average. So if your video card is having 27 FPS or 25 FPS average in the game, you will have 3 FPS boost. And if you have 60 FPS in the game average, you will have about 5-6 FPS boost, from 4 to 6 FPS boost, which is nice as well for those who's looking for extra performance for free. Here we go, folks. You just learned how to overclock your GTX 760, how to use the GPU Z, Afterburner, and Precision with some strategies and methods, and how to overclock your video card properly and safely. Thank you so much. My name is Alex Morose. Please thumbs up and like, as well as subscribe, so you're not going to miss any video tutorials. It will be a nice ride. I will have tons of different video tutorials on overclocking, computer hardware, graphic design, programming, web developing, software developing, and etc. It's going to be a great years of tutorials, and you don't want to miss it. If you enjoyed this video tutorial, please subscribe. Just click the subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube. And don't forget to thumbs up and like, so I will have more motivation to create even more video tutorials for you folks and dedicate more of my free time for you. Keep in mind that image on the back, it's a Denver, was taken by me in 2012, actually 2013, and I used my Nikon D90 DSLR and one of my classic portrait lens, which is 35 to 70mm f2.8. I'm a photographer as well, so it's going to be more tutorials on the photography as well. Keep that in mind. Thank you so much for watching and happy clocking.